the fall of 2008, the United States government did something no one alive had ever seen. It handed over $700 billion, almost $1 trillion, to the very banks that had just set the economy on fire. Not to the families losing their houses, not to the workers losing their jobs, to the banks. And by the time the smoke cleared, those banks were richer than before the crash, while the men who lost everything got a letter in the mail and a moving truck. This is the story of how America bailed out the people who broke it and called it saving the country. To understand the bailout, you have to understand the lie underneath it. For years, banks had been selling mortgages to people who could never repay them, then bundling those bad loans into safe investments and selling them to the entire world. It worked as long as home prices kept climbing. In 2007, they stopped. By September 2008, the dominoes were already falling. Bear Stearns had been swallowed in a fire sale. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two companies backing half the mortgages in America, were seized by the government. Then came the name that changed everything: Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old investment bank, gone in a weekend, the largest bankruptcy in American history, and Washington let it die. Wall Street panicked. Credit froze. Stock markets fell off a cliff. And somewhere in Washington, a very different kind of decision was being made. Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson walked into Congress with a 3-page document. 3 pages. No oversight. Unlimited authority to spend $700 billion of taxpayer money buying up the bank's toxic assets. Lawmakers were told, in private, that if they didn't act, the entire financial system could collapse within days. It was called the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. Congress rejected it once. The market dropped nearly 800 points in a single day, the worst one-day crash in Wall Street history to that point. Days later, terrified, they passed it anyway. October 3rd, 2008, President Bush signed it into law. $700 billion, headed straight for the same institutions that had just detonated the global economy. But here's the part most people never hear. That money didn't stay in Bush's hands for long. When Barack Obama took office in January 2009, the crisis wasn't over. It was just getting started. Unemployment was rocketing toward 10%. Over 8 million Americans would eventually lose their homes. And Obama, barely a month into his presidency, had to decide what to do with the second half of that bailout money. He kept it running. His administration used TARP funds to prop up Citigroup and Bank of America, to rescue AIG, the insurance giant that had insured all those toxic mortgage bonds, to bail out General Motors and Chrysler, keeping over 1 million auto jobs alive. Then came the stress tests, a public accounting exercise designed to prove the banks were stable again. They were declared healthy, confidence returned, stock prices soared. For the banks, the emergency was over. For everyone else, it was just beginning. Here is the number that should make you angry. The banks that received bailout money paid back the government with interest. On paper, TARP eventually turned a small profit for taxpayers. But that's not the full story, and Wall Street knows it. While the banks were being kept alive with cheap government support, ordinary homeowners were offered a program to modify their mortgages, and it failed almost everyone who applied. Millions of foreclosures went through anyway. Executives at bailed-out firms collected enormous bonuses in the very years their companies were being propped up by public money, a detail that triggered outrage in Congress and became one of the defining scandals of the crisis. The banks were called too big to fail. The families losing their homes were just called the market correcting itself. You'd think a collapse this size would end with prison sentences. It didn't. Not one major Wall Street executive was criminally convicted for the crimes that triggered the 2008 crash. Some paid fines. Some companies settled. The people who built the machine walked free. In 2010, The Obama administration did push through the Dodd-Frank Act, the largest overhaul of financial regulations since the Great Depression. New rules, new oversight, a watchdog agency to protect consumers. But even supporters admit it didn't break up the biggest banks. If anything, the biggest banks came out of the crisis even bigger than before. The system that broke America in 2008 wasn't dismantled. It was patched, reinforced, and left standing. The official numbers say the bailout worked. The banks survived. The economy recovered. The stock market hit record highs. But trust didn't recover. An entire generation watched the government move heaven and earth to save the powerful, and watched them move almost nothing to save everyone else. That anger didn't disappear. It sat there, quietly, for years, and it would shape American politics for the next decade. $700 billion saved the banks who broke America. The question this country never fully answered is who was going to save everyone else.